With pleasure.
Hello, good evening and welcome to our event. Our topic today is really apt and very, very excited to hear our two experts talk about it. And you all know the title, to debunk the myths about anger in the Black community. But before we start, this event is a collaboration between Harvard Alumni for Mental Health and Weiner Consulting LLC. And I'm going to get the president of Harvard Alumni for Mental Health, Dr. Marie Christine, to please tell us about alumni. We call it HUM for short. And then I'll also get the CEO for consulting to talk about Warner Consulting. Let's just know about the two organizations before we get going. Okay, Marie.
Thank you so very much for your warm welcome, Ngozi, Director of Culture and Diversity at Harvard Alumni for Mental Health. My name is Marie Christine Nidzi, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here as President of Harvard Alumni for Mental Health. We are very excited for today's programming. This is a topic that is at the heart of a lot of things that are happening in our society and around the world. And we know that our community is eager to hear about mental health in different contexts, different cultural contexts, different countries around the world, different groups within each region of the world. And very, very kindly, Dr. Okoze has taken her role to heart in organizing a series of events like today to address a specific aspect of mental health in a specific demographic or cultural environment. And today we're so excited to have our speakers. And Ngozi, perhaps you can start introducing our speakers and tell us more about them.
Okay, yeah, we have great experts today. And the interesting thing is that these experts, they're a couple. Not only that they're a couple, they've lived the experiences. And not only living the experiences, they are also experts in those experiences. They studied it, they are experts in it, they have all the qualifications and they lived through it. I'll start by introducing Dr. Ryan Werner. Dr. Ryan is the founder and chief executive officer of RC Warner Consulting, LLC. He is a sought after licensed psychologist, researcher, speaker, and consultant. He received a PhD in counseling psychology from Marquette University. His experience in speaking engagements and trainings at both national and international levels has been published in various peer-reviewed journals and has accelerated change within small and large organizations. He's an expert in the study of microaggression, anti-racism, psychological resilience, and unconscious bias. And his message has been heard by millions of people around the world. We welcome you, Dr. Werner.
Yeah, thanks so much to be here.
Okay, and I'll also go ahead to introduce our next speaker. She is Mrs. Jamaya Werner. She's a licensed social worker, graduated from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign with her master's of social work with a concentration in mental health in 2015. Currently, Mrs. Warner serves as the chief wellness consultant for RC Warner Consulting. Additionally, Mrs. Warner is the founder and CEO of Rose Legacy Institute, in which she conducts psychotherapy and community engagement for underserved and marginalized population. Mrs. Warner is an expert in the domains of women empowerment, behavioral health, and identity-related stress. Mrs. Warner serves as an advocate for those of vulnerable population. As an African-American woman, Mrs. Warner supports movements that liberate, encourage, and uplift underrepresented population. We welcome you today, Mrs. Warner.
Thank you for having me this evening.
Yes. So we will start by having Marie Christine give us a little bit of insight into what Harvard Alumni for Mental Health is up about.
Thank you very much. Harvard Alumni for Mental Health is a group of alumni that was created in 2014 and became a nonprofit officially in 2017. With the advent of COVID-19, a small group of us came together and became imbued in the mission of serving the needs of our community to better address important missions such as lowering the stigma against mental illness, facilitating access to care, especially for populations who were underserved traditionally and having difficulty to access these services, including in a culturally appropriate manner. The membership of HUM conveys an enormous international groups as well, who is scattered all around the globe. And we want to make sure that we also address the reality of mental health in different contexts and provide access to resources through a widespread network of clinicians around all of the regions in which our members are located. Our mission is therefore to organize weekly events such as the one you're watching or attending today to help lower the stigma around mental illness and facilitate access to care for all around our community. Thank you so much. And please now tune into the event. I will be in the background listening.
Okay. And Dr. Warner, can you just give us a little bit of insight into your company, your organization?
Definitely. So RC Warner Consulting assists teams with creating a culture of inclusion to maximize their potential. We started about a little bit over 2 years ago, and just within the last couple of years, we've been able to work on multiple continents across the globe, enhancing leadership, diversity, and wellness. We believe that a lot of us are going to spend most of our lives at work, right? And when we go to work, we want to feel that we belong. We want to feel fulfilled within the work that we do. However, we know that a lot of organizations, may not support that culture of inclusion. And in turn, that impacts wellness of their employees, plus it impacts leadership abilities as well. So with that, we work with small and large organizations to ensure that they have the skills and knowledge so that they can enhance their performance through leadership, diversity, and wellness. So I'm really excited today to be here to talk about this wellness topic. And yeah, I'm looking forward to get into it. So thanks for having me.
We are really lucky to have the Warner couple today with us. And at the end of their presentation, we expect to at least gain an insight into the challenge, the myths of anger within the Black community. I'll be able to identify some social and cultural factors that may influence emotions of anger and distress amongst the Black population, and also get some coping strategies that can enable us to manage the challenges of these emotions when distress arises. Okay, now let's get going, right?
We're ready.
Yeah, I bet we have quite a number of people now in our audience, and I'm sure the first thing they want to know is that what actually prompted you to focus your work on anger among the Black community specifically. And as we have in the brief introduction, there is who is the angry Black man, who is the angry Black woman. Can any of you can take it up and then the other person can finish it for us?
Definitely.
Thank you.
My beautiful wife, Jamia, did you want to get us started?
That was sweet. Okay, so let's start here. I identify as a Black woman, as said in bio. So I identify with similar experiences of those who look like me. And so my work is to help empathize, support, and educate those same emotions. Now you asked a really important question, who is the angry Black woman? She doesn't exist. The angry Black woman, the angry Black man does not exist. It's a myth. This is a mythological character, a stereotype of the African American, of the Black man, of the Black woman. So that's where we are today. We are here to debunk this myth that this person, this character exists. He or she does not exist. Anger does exist, but not as a characteristic or individual's identity.
Wow. Thank you. And Dr. Werner, add something for us there?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I'm so passionate about this because obviously I identify as a Black man, and throughout my experiences, sometimes, others have doubted my intelligence or assumed that I'm an athlete or, those types, those microaggressions, become impactful, and they do lead to some emotions of frustration, of emotions of disappointment, emotions of confusion. And throughout these lived experiences, that has motivated me in my research and the work that I do within my consulting company to help out, marginalized groups, especially groups of people of color, so that they don't feel alone, so that they do belong, and they don't let these stereotypes or these microaggressions impact, their ability to succeed. So that has motivated me to learn more about this topic that I do.
Awesome. And to assist me moderating this program today will be also our president. She's on stand, Marie Christine. So she will jump in now and take us to the next issue to be discussed. Marie?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, I believe that our audience was curious to hear you both address the ways in which systemic racism, social injustices, and other experiences of inequity can impact the expression of anger amongst members of the Black community.
Definitely. So obviously with the limited time we have today, we don't have time to go into the historical, systemic injustices that we've seen in the criminal legal system, education system, et cetera. But I will say that those experiences still do have an impact. We see the disproportionate rates of individuals, especially individuals who identify as people of color, and more specifically, Black males and Black women. We see that this disproportionate rate of incarceration. We see specifically within the educational system that Black children are historically suspended at 4 times more rate than white children, right? So we see that these statistics and this exists within our systems and within our structures. So with that obviously contributes to that intense emotion. And oftentimes when we think about anger, we think about that has to be correlated with something that's bad. But we know that anger can be adaptive. Anger motivates us, to perform. It motivates us to take action, right? However, at times when we are not really understanding what that really anger looks like and how that is displayed, then it may come out in different ways. For instance, we should know that anger is a secondary emotion, right? So underneath anger could be frustration, could be just interpersonalized pain, right? It could be confusion, disappointment, etc. But it may come off at the surface externally as anger. And within the Black community, we've been historically stereotyped that when external events happen, for instance, systemic injustices, then that is attributed to our personality, right? And if we know about attribution theory, ultimately we need to understand that there's also external factors that attribute, how we respond, right? So with that, that's just my 2 cents, about the systemic piece and how that may come up.
Dr. Warner, since in our mission, we're trying to make all of these content accessible, could you please tell us in 2 minutes what attribution theory is, please?
Sure. So attribution theory, the way I look at it, deals with how we perceive, certain actions from individuals, so whether that's internal or external. So for instance, let's talk about the death of George Floyd. So historically, we look and see, this happen in society, and everyone maybe a lot of individuals may look at the Black community as angry, right? Maybe attributed to internal anger, right? So sometimes that's attributed to our personality instead of external events, which contribute to, that intense emotion, rightfully so. So how we attribute anger, whether it be internally or externally, is often looked differently compared to the group that you're looking at. So for instance, when, individuals who don't identify with people of color, they often, that's often looked at as an external factor. Will that external event happen? Rightfully so, they're angry, right? However, it may be the opposite when we looked at it as community, towards communities of color, specifically in the Black community.
So something on the other half of this is when I said earlier that this characteristic, this individual does not exist, it was created due to particular events in history, right? We're thinking about, I can speak from the Black woman. If I don't walk into the room smiling, I'm automatically labeled as angry. I'm automatically labeled as, unattractive. I'm not feminine enough. There's an issue with me. When we think about some of the injustices here, let's look at the workforce. The workforce is made up of nearly 7% of Black women. However, you don't see Black women in leadership positions as often due to the perceived characteristic of angry. Not feminine enough because she's not subtle enough with her emotions, because her delivery can be harsh. However, those are perceived thoughts and perspectives of the woman. And so when we think about anger and we think about racism, think about social injustice, we have to look at the perception. And so it's the perceiver's perception of my disposition as a person. And then it's attributed to, hey, she's angry. And sometimes, as a society, we only have the emotions of sad, happy. We forget frustration, we forget shame, we forget disappointment, and all those contribute to the perception of anger. And though I am allowed to be angry, if I express any disdain for anything, it's always going to be 10 times worse than those who do not identify as Black or a person of color, because it's going against the social construct of what it means to be susceptible in society.
Wow. Awesome. It's so amazing that some of those emotions, like you listed, disappointment, shame, and various other emotions, are usually attributed to anger when displayed by people of Black population. And yeah, it's good to know that. And sometimes, like you say, we are more in the work actually, yet in the leadership position, there are very few. So the injustices usually are perceived. And when they are manifested and perceived, and then there's a reaction for disappointment or, resentment or whatever, it's interpreted as anger. Thank you. What impact do you think such expressions of anger have on mental health of the Black community? If you can take us one step further on that.
Definitely. I mean, so these stereotypes, that individuals within the Black community may face, that has a significant impact, on their confidence in themselves, on their self-efficacy, and in the work setting, also impact their performance. I can give a personal example. During my doctoral program, I did an internship, a clinical internship within a correctional facility, maximum security prison. And I remember, walking in, and unfortunately, I saw everyone who looked like me. I saw a lot of Black males. And I remember one of my supervisors, she told me one of the first days, she said, "Ryan, you look like an inmate." And I looked at her like, "What do you mean I look like an inmate?" She was like, "Well, you need to smile more because you look like an inmate." And right there, that microaggression was significantly impactful, right? I doubted myself. I experienced that additional anxiety when I walked in. And, we just know also throughout the literature and research that, these stereotypes that we experience on a continual basis, these microaggressions, these subtle covert forms of discrimination have an impact. They lead to depressive symptoms, additional anxiety as well, isolation. So with that, it's important that we're talking about this topic, right? Because we need to bring this to light. Others who may experience, similar challenges that I went through don't feel alone.
Do you know if this is limited to the Black population, or if people of other races, because America is pretty very different. From your experience and your research and your exposure to different other minority groups, do you think it's limited to the Black community?
But we know that other groups, groups of color also experience, just inequality within certain systems. So for instance, the educational system, I mentioned that, Black and brown children, are disproportionately suspended at higher rates compared to white children. It's been shown throughout the literature. So, when we look at, individuals of color, we also see those disparities.
Okay, and is it, if Jamai will help us there, is it displayed exactly the same way when comparing children and adults? Does it?
So when we think about anger, when we think about teaching our children how to be and exist in the world, we think about teaching them to protect themselves, right? And when we look at Black children, we think of their emotions as a threat. And sometimes, because if we anger to be a threat, that internalizes, I should be quiet. If I'm hurt, if I need help, if I need to do something, I can't show anger, can't show that frustration or that disappointment when a teacher disproportionately called me out compared to my classmates and I was frustrated. I must take it in and keep it in, because if not, I'm going to be deemed as bad. I'm going to be deemed as inappropriate to the classroom setting, failure to progress, doesn't get along with others. That similarly, it can translate to the adulthood where it's not a team player, does not do well taking or follow instructions. And so there are similarities. It just starts with children and it ends up going to adulthood. And when we think about how that internalizes into our identity, think about our mental health. Now I'm told I cannot speak my feelings. I shouldn't tell things when they happen to me because, hey, again, we only have certain emotions that we can express aloud. And if we express the wrong emotion, there's going to be a consequence to my action or to this emotion. And so it's really important that we teach from childhood that anger, okay, it's good. It's okay. It's, fight or flight. There's fear, there's freeze, but you can be angry and it does not constitute a threat, nor does it consequently have these terrible consequences from society. And so it's really important that we look at it from a childhood perspective so that when we become adults, that we're allowed to freely express who we are without being labeled, the angry Black woman, angry Black male.
Wow, awesome.
Such an important consideration, right? It's surprising when you take a step back how little we teach about emotions as a healthy part of navigating in a complex interpersonal social environment. So I'm curious if both of you have given thought to how the previous 2 years and perhaps children not going physically in school because of COVID-19, how that might have impacted all the facets of the topic you've been touching upon, both in children and in adults.
Yeah. Well, we know obviously with COVID-19, obviously all of us were isolated, at one point in time. And we know that isolation does not go well with promoting mental health. So sometimes we may internalize those emotions, right? We're not able to, externalize, through maybe physical activity, through reaching out to our social supports, going to different events. So, in turn, a lot of us, may internalize those emotions and they may come out, in different ways. So especially if we have not been taught how to effectively externalize, in a healthy way.
So COVID alone was not COVID alone. We also had racial injustice happen. We had just monkeypox. We had just a time of change in the world. And so that allowed for individuals not to have the space to connect as we used to, right? So we didn't have classmates or our coworkers to be able to rally with us when we experienced microaggressions in the class or workforce setting. We didn't have someone to, hey, maybe you were reacting positively and the other individual perceived it as anger and had someone to have a check and balance with. And so because we did not have those social interactions as we're used to and, previous to 2020, there was some anger built. There was some, proportionate frustration, shame. There's this space of who can I talk to if I can't talk to anyone about how I'm feeling? And if that happened, and if it continues to happen, unfortunately, we're going to continue to push the agenda of the angry Black male, the angry Black child, angry Black woman. And so it's really important for all individuals to have some emotional intelligence, to have some insight into how they're dealing with their feelings, while it's important for other individuals who are not identifying as people of color to understand the impacts of COVID, of insurmountable amount of historical oppression, and then have conversations about that aloud.
Yeah, great. As we are talking about the isolation, it actually made me to start thinking, because actually we all got isolated. And what happens? Our best playmates became the social media. So do you think social media have impacted it positively or negatively? What's your experience? Let's just share that.
I love social media. I do, but I also have a hate for social media at times, because there is this space of individuals sending out the wrong perceived messaging. And so when we think about how to connect with other individuals about our feelings, sometimes not everyone understands that. And because we have hidden, personalities behind keyboards and IG handles, there aren't enough people promoting sometimes the positive way to connect with individuals. And so it can have a great impact, or it can have a harmful impact, just depending on the user.
Mhm.
Yeah, Dr. Ryan, you want to add to it? I saw you shaking your head.
Yeah, I mean, social media is so tricky, right? Because we often maybe try to use that as a coping mechanism. For instance, after a long day, let me pull up social media so I can, let my hair down and just relax, but then sometimes that can lead to additional stress, right? So, I mean, it's tricky. And now that these platforms are expanding, right? We know that the metaverse, that's starting to be, another big type of platform. And it's just other ways that we communicate. I think sometimes it's used it's tried to be used in an adaptive way. Like, we want to improve our connections, but we also need to be careful that, too much social media, or, maybe seeking out that platform for or to express our emotions, that may sometimes not be, the best way to go about that, right? So, just being aware of that is going to be important.
With anything, there's balance. And when you have media, it's really important for those who are in charge of their media platforms to be informed, to be competent culturally, gender, and before you post, just make sure that it's something that may not oppress and or disrespect others.
And then we add all of the societal, challenges and injustices, where like everyone has different opinions, rightfully so. And however, sometimes, a lot of times, we're not respectful towards each other. Like, if someone holds a different opinion, then that may lead to confrontation, right? That may lead to intense emotions. That may lead to threat. That may lead to anger. That may lead to, just confrontation. And so, with these different events in society, right, that can another layer of complexity if we bring that to social media and try to use that platform to have dialogue.
Okay.
I appreciate that word dialogue that you're bringing here, right? And we have an entire series at Harvard Alumni for Mental Health about how to have difficult conversations, how to disagree, experience those intense emotions, and stay in dialogue. Acknowledge that we're coming with different cultural norms, that we have different gender norms, that we might express ourselves in a way that is not intuitively the way the person on the other end of the table would expect to receive it. And yet there is room for a dialogue. I'm curious if both of you can tell us a little bit more about what you think we can do to both demystify this perception of anger attached to an identity, as opposed to anger as a natural spectrum of emotion that all humans experience, and also perhaps start to tell us about how we can address it in a day-to-day manner, in ourselves, checking our biases, in others, when we see an interaction, when we are educators with children or parents with children. How do we turn all this theory into concrete steps we can all take to increase this dialogue and make it healthier and more supportive?
Definitely. And that's an important question. And, we start with our children, right? I think number one, it's important to talk about this, right? Bring this to the surface. We think about like racial socialization. We need to be able to prepare our families, our children, to survive in this world. Sometimes very hostile, and sometimes, very confrontational, and that's sometimes the hard truth. And no one wants to live in a world that they have to their back, or they have to come to truth with the hard reality, especially with the nature of slavery, right, in America, and all these other systemic injustices. But sometimes we need to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly, right, and prepare our children for that. I can think about when I was little. My parents taught me, you're a Black male, when you're driving, right, and you get pulled over, they may treat you differently just based on how you look. That's the harsh reality. And sometimes that's really tough to say out loud. But it was important for me when I grew up, to know that, I maybe look different based on the color of my skin. And in the history that has, taken place within the United States and America, we know that certain groups and individuals of different genders and sexual orientations and religious backgrounds and socioeconomic statuses, they're sometimes treated different, right? So sometimes that's just important to say out loud and, teach our children about that, not to scare them, but also just show them the harsh reality. But also, we need to instill that cultural pride, right? Once again, my parents, always told me that, you should be proud, to be Black, right, in America. You come from a history of resilience, right? And I remember having conversations with my grandfather. He's 94 years old right now. And every time I talk to him, he tells me it's one of the same stories about how he was in Mississippi and he was driving and he almost got lynched by a white mob. And, when he tells me about this, how he's been able to get through that and, have, 10 plus and be able to, ultimately, bring me, to life through his legacy, right? Like, I get invigorated by that. I get passionate. I get excited, right? That energizes me to understand that harsh reality, but also know that I come from a culture of resilience, and I should be proud of that, right? So, yeah, so I'll leave it to Jamia. What do you think about this?
I want us to be very careful here, because the one thing that we want to talk about is making sure that we debunk the fact that the stereotype of a angry Black man or Black woman exists. But we also want to validate that anger is okay. We're not saying due to the injustice that we've, faced as a race, due to social injustice currently and past, that those do not anger us and we should not have those emotions. Those are valid. What we are trying to is the fact that anger only exists in one particular race and is only charged by one particular group. Now, the way that we can start having these conversations is validation, it's acceptance, it's knowledge, it's teaching it in schools. Right now, I currently hear our 2-year-old cracking up and having the time of his life. And though he's happy right now, he has big feelings of anger or frustration. We validate that. We try something different to say it's okay to be angry, but let's work through this moment. And sometimes working through those moments don't happen right away, especially in the world that we live in. But when we are working through them, have a community to work through those. That's what's important. Be it in a workplace, be it in the school system, having co-workers, employers, teachers, admin that also understand the importance of validation, empathy, and conversation. And that's how I think we can begin that change.
And then when we add that layer of gender, right? We think about like toxic masculinity. Men aren't supposed to cry. Men aren't supposed to show emotion, right? And narrative, can be detrimental, right? Because I try to tell my son it's okay to cry. It's okay, to share your emotion, show your emotion, display that, right? So being able to tell, especially our Black men, that it's okay to cry. It's okay to, express how you feel, right? That's going to be a way that we can externalize instead of internalize those difficult emotions.
Yeah. Thank you Thank you. Do you think within institutions, we've talked about how we can teach us at home, how do we do that as educators or to our friends or caregivers? How do we extend this training or this awareness to people outside of us and outside of our home?
When we see some injustice, right?
Yeah.
We have to speak on it. And that's the only way that change comes about. If we continue to live in silence, we continue to perpetuate stereotypical myths about a particular race, gender, religion, is going to continue until it's challenged. And challenging does not always mean a negative confrontation. Challenging means dialogue. It means platforms as such. It means having teachers trainings and culturally competent trainings. It has, the conversation at the, the Christmas table or the Thanksgiving table that's coming up when, your favorite auntie or uncle says something that you don't necessarily agree with, being able to respectfully challenge it and have that dialogue of like, okay, we're in a more progressive time, or we're trying to get into a more progressive time. Let's talk about this. If it comes to individuals that don't look like us, still being able to say, hey, this isn't okay. This is the reality. When we talk about social media, when we talk about media, it's challenging in those platforms that have the main character as the angry Black woman because she sells the TV show. Mm-hmm. That time and that narrative is also up. So it's those challenges like that we can do.
And that dialogue is going to help us acknowledge and be aware of our blind spots. Oftentimes we don't know that we have that unconscious bias until that's brought out. So being able to ask somebody, hey, I'm curious, what did you mean by that when you said X statement? That's going to be a way for them to maybe reflect, and that may open their eyes and open some room for dialogue in a respectful, adaptive way, that can actually lead to change and acknowledgement of bias. And when we think about bias, having bias does not make us a bad person. It makes us human. Right? We have to have bias to navigate our world. So number one, understanding that bias bad, but number two, just acknowledging that, hey, we all may do this at some point in time. Even though I talk about these type of topics on a weekly basis, I have bias and blind spots myself, So being able to acknowledge that, being able to identify when you are making a mistake and try not to be defensive and just being open to learning is going to be another important step.
Well, I believe when we start taking some questions, because I see many people here who logged in from Nigeria, actually, they were just curious about this topic. Yes, we have quite a number of them, and they'll probably have questions for us because I like what you said now, Ryan, that sometimes bias, sometimes it also keeps us in check because sometimes we perpetuate that. And I know in Nigeria, not white or Black race, it's all Black race. But we still have tribal biases. We still have different things. And we also have microaggression. We have various tribes struggling with those things. And some of you might know Nigeria has been in the news now, and it's like an election is coming on, and there's also a lot of bias that we all carry with us. And sometimes we don't know. And sometimes we have that bias against the other race and we don't know. So dialogue. Thank you really for bringing that.
Can I add a piece to that, please? So we also need to talk about in-group bias as well, yes. Because we, in the Black community, we talk about colorism, and we often look at those who are lighter skin, are more attractive, or beautiful, right? And it's been shown throughout, research that those who have darker skin are typically looked at as more, criminal or not as beautiful, and they don't adhere to those, traditional Western beauty standards, right? So I think we also need to, identify that in-group bias as well in our own community that we may unintentionally perpetuate over time.
Yes, thank you. Marie, you want to help us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So Thank you all of you to be in the audience live today. I know the video will be also made available for those of you who are in time zones where it's difficult to log in synchronously. I want to encourage everybody to type your question in the chat space or to unmute if you wish to ask a question of our speaker. They've kindly agreed to take some of your questions. And perhaps to get us started, we had one that is asking, so we've talked about the individual level, the community with the school and the institutions. How about the policy level? Zoom back out and like, what would be your inspiration in terms of changes that you would like to see happen at the policy level?
That's a great question. So the first thing I think about, since I work with small and large organizations to help them shift their policy, I reviewed a employee handbook for a large organization recently, and my was to identify any bias or blind spots within that employee handbook. And what I found was there are sometimes within our policies and systemic, especially within the workplace, that ultimately, may perpetuate bias. So for instance, in the handbook, it talked about certain individuals are allowed to wear hair wraps, but other individuals are not. For instance, hair wraps are allowed for women, but do-rags may be not allowed for men. Individuals who may wear a turban, right, that may not be allowed versus other groups, right? Like, so that's just an example of how bias, may be perpetuated within our policies that we may not even be aware of, right? So starting, I just think about the workplace because my organization, helps enhance performance within the workplace, starting with workplace policy, starting with the employee handbook, starting with the strategic plan that organizations have, right? What may be embedded within there that may leave room for additional blind spots, right? So that's going to be really important to further examine.
It comes down to the same things when we're talking about the educational system, what's allowed into curriculum, what's being taught when it comes to emotional intelligence, when it's taught to become taught about history. When we think about history, herstory also actually exists and actually giving, voices to those who are marginalized, who are vulnerable, and who do not get the full picture told. And that's where the myths are coming from, right? So we get, oh, she's a Black woman and she's angry, but we forget all of the things that were perpetuated against her to become this person that shows up to be stone-faced, to come into a room to demand confidence, is to be taught to have this energy about herself that can be presented as masculine and feminine, but somehow we always ignore the femininity of a masculine energy when it comes to a woman. And so it's having that part of the curriculum, being able to teach those things from the get-go, from training perspective when it comes to organizations, and just having that be embedded from the time an organization, a school, an institute, an agency is built, that you're not building this policy based on a particular person or gender or race, but on a human. You're building this to have humans interact and to create. And so kind of taking out, I don't like to say we live in a colorblind world, but take out the things that make up the human and think about how you would like to be treated if we were all just called human.
I want to add on that when it comes to policy so we know, for instance, that women in the workplace, they're typically judged on their personality traits and men are judged on more performance, right? So that may lead to bias, okay? Hey, you need to smile more, or hey, you come off closed off, right? That's how women typically in certain workplaces are judged when it comes to promotion, et cetera. So one way we can mitigate that is in our policy, be able to look at our performance standards, be able to look at our peer review process. That can be a way to mitigate that bias, mitigate that inequity that we see.
Thank you. Yeah, as you're talking, right, it brings the example, the Boston Philharmonic, who had a stark gender imbalance, and they started conducting auditions behind a curtain. So it would be based only on the performance, and they were at parity within 3 years, something like that. It was really right. So there are efficacious measures that can be put into place. I'm glad to know that you're both dedicating your work to this. We had another question, and I think it goes back to a little bit earlier in our conversation. You were saying, you're talking about externalizing, internalizing emotions. You're talking about the impact it can have when we learn that there are negative consequences to expressing our anger, so we turn it into something else. Jimia, you were talking about different, shame and guilt and frustration and disappointment. I'd love for you to help us. What if I'm looking inwards and I'm thinking, how am I relating to my anger? What is that experience to me? How am I related to other important emotions that are either adjacent or that can come from addressing the situation that caused my anger in the first place? What would you like people to take away, in other words, in terms of navigating their own emotions day to day?
Label our emotions, learn to label our emotions. We do not have to go under the large umbrella of sad, happy, or mad. To be able to label them, which looks like taking a step back and seeing what started the feelings of frustration, what started these feelings of shame. Where did that come from? Where did our self-identity become a part of someone else's agenda or conversation? It turned to us to feel like we can't be who we want to be in this space. And so learning how to really identify, label emotions, label trigger points, label the start of it all. And sometimes that takes looking back into history and getting the knowledge, understanding that sometimes we need to step away from social media. Because at one point during COVID, I think we were just out, right? There was so much going on in the world, and we just kept seeing things come across our timeline, and we started feeling anger. But it wasn't just anger that we were feeling so much pain and hurt. And because we weren't able to identify with that pain and hurt because it wasn't acceptable, all we said was we're angry, and then we felt burnt out. So learning how to identify and label so that we can start to heal and to start processing these things earlier before they turn into expressed anger in a negative way.
And oftentimes just starting with, I feel. And sometimes if we say, I feel upset, I feel let down because you did that. When you say it out loud, it may trigger, a different point in our and we can actually identify that a little bit better. And that's going to help us get to those triggers as well. But just saying out loud, just practicing it. I feel a certain way, and being able to practice expressing it. And if you struggle with that, that's totally okay, and that's why maybe seeking therapy, seeking support could also be helpful.
Thank you both very much. Ngozi, do you want to take the next one?
Yeah, I want to know if there's anybody in the audience that wants to say something, add something. You can unmute and talk. Anybody?
I got a new one about the word secondary emotion that Ryan used at some point in the presentation, saying anger is often a secondary emotion. I think that can tie in with some of those concrete takeaways that you were both discussing right now. Do you want to tell us a little bit more?
Definitely. So before an emotion comes up, there's often a belief around that emotion. Okay. So for instance, I'm in traffic and there's a lot of traffic, and I say, I'm angry. I'm beeping my horn. Everybody's driving too slow, right? However, before that emotion comes up, my belief is I'm going to be late to my destination. Or my belief is no matter what I do, I'm not able to get out the house in time, right? And I feel bad about myself. Like there's a belief before that. And then ultimately that leads to, that emotion, feeling upset, frustrated, etc. And that leads to an outcome with us expressing that emotion in a certain way. So for us, we need to identify what is the belief underneath the emotion. Okay. We say we're upset, but what do I believe? Do I believe that I did something wrong? That's what's causing me being upset? Or do I believe that, people can't be trusted or I can rely on others, right? And that contributes to my emotion, right? Whatever that belief is, identifying that is going to be very helpful with then leading to that secondary emotion.
Thank you. I think one of the questions that we like asking is in what happened right before that, right? This idea of pulling on the thread. So, okay, here I am, I'm feeling this right now. What happened just before to try and get to the roots or the trigger, as you were saying?
Please, Marie-Christine, sorry to cut you. Please, if you look on your screen, you will see a survey. Please go ahead and complete the survey and submit. We want to know how you feel about this event, and then just your thoughts matter to us.
I think a great takeaway from tonight's discussion is the bottom line of who we are does not exist in an emotion. Our individual identity cannot be characterized by a statement or by a myth or by a long, ill-willed myth of who an individual is. And so it's really important to take a stand in debunking myths as such as the angry Black man, the angry Black woman, learning to speak up against these injustices as you see them, as an individual, as a group, and being able to really understand the internalization of anger. That's going to be what moves us forward and making progress.
And to add on that, just practical things that we can all do, no matter our background. We can all try to debunk this using practical strategies. For instance, if you hear a stereotype or a myth, or a microaggression, just ask another person, hey, I'm curious what you meant by that. Or sharing some of your personal experience. Hey, my personal experiences, all Black women aren't angry, right? Or providing some psychoeducation, right? So that they can better understand their bias or blind spots. So doing that in a inquisitive way, in a way that is non-confrontational, in a way that is calm, that you're really trying to open that dialogue. Some individuals may not be receptive, but others may actually take that back and say, I never thought about that. Right. So just knowing that there are practical techniques that we can all implement to help debunk this myth so that we can work and live in a more inclusive society and communities.
And and we can, amongst all of us, try to debunk the myth, because from experiences, I work with multinational group of people, and it happens also. As immigrants, there are also some that we experience as immigrants. And Marie-Christine here can tell you, Marie-Christine had a PhD in psychology in France and went to America. It was like, you never went to school. You have to start all over again. So she had to get another PhD in clinical psychology in the USA. Even at that, all her years of experience in France didn't count. So, and with that, of course, we build we build resentment in whatever environment we are in. So the thing about this event today is that it kind of opens our eyes to the fact that injustice is never fair. It doesn't even matter in any situation, because for some of us, I'm from Nigeria, and I know when we are treated unfairly, we protest, we rebel, and some people of certain tribe as being angry, but it's just the unfairness that is happening in certain regions of the country. So it's really, really very, very enlightening to listen to you all talk today. And if you can just give us a few words of
And Guzi, perhaps, sorry, there's one more question before we wrap up.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm
giving voice to a question as I'm manning the chat. how would you counsel an African-American executive who has fears of being perceived as the angry Black man when you know he's not unreasonable in his fear? What is the balance between encouraging him to take up his space at work and knowing it may not be safe for him? Is it up to him to debunk the myth? How can we support him?
Yeah, so that's a big question. And I think the first thing that I would want to do if that was, my individual that I was working with is helping understand the impact this has on the individual. Does this lead to, imposter syndrome? Does this lead to, feeling additional anxiety when you go to work or frustration, right? So I will understand that impact a little bit more. And then what is in this person's control and what is not in this person's control. It is in this person's control that they can ensure that they're practicing, their, just coping strategies to manage that, external distress. And then sometimes it may not be in their control to totally change that person's, but maybe they can advocate for themselves. Maybe they can, use those practical techniques that I just to try to respectfully challenge those biases and blind spots. Hey, I'm curious what you meant by that. You tell me more. From my experience, XYZ, right? So being able to use those practical strategies, but also know that you are enough, know that, for you to be able to, just progress to that higher level leadership, type of role, that you do deserve to be in a position, and ensuring that that doesn't have a negative impact on that person's well-being will be my primary focus. So focusing what's in your control, what's not in your control, is going to be important.
Everything he said with the added understanding that strength is not anger, resiliency is not anger, and presence, because presence that makes other uncomfortable does not devalue your presence nonetheless. So you take up the space you need to take up, but understand that you are not in control of somebody else's perception of you. And while safety is always important, and we want to make sure that that's really, really on in here, safety is important. Being comfortable in who you are and in your identity is even more important in certain circumstances. And so if a place does not value you and you need to take a leave of absence or find a place that can value you, that's something that is also your control and should be explored.
Thank you so very much. I'm gonna let Dr. Okozie conclude for today's event. It was such a pleasure and a privilege to learn from you both. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, I see Dr. Susie, and I like your comment. Thank you. Yeah, as an immigrant, I strongly advocate for more education in diversity and cultural appreciation. Yeah, if we look through that, because we have many layers. As a Black person, you already have one layer. You have about 5 layers. Then a Black immigrant, you have, as an immigrant, which includes Marie-Christine, you have other layers. Then as a Black immigrant, we are taking it to even a much higher level. But like you said, resilience, most of us have developed it over time. And we have to hold strong to it and try to be as confident as we are, and accept our strength. And like Dr. Ryan said some time ago, it's what is our core belief? What do we think about ourselves? And if we have built that strength, sometimes we can get frustrated, not angry, but at the same time, we continue to navigate. Nothing can hold us down. It's only bad when we feel threatened and we shy away. But it's okay to feel that threat and move on and trudge on and say, you know what, yeah, I'm going to overcome this challenge. It's one of those. I've overcome so many over time, and I'm going to overcome this. And many times we don't expect success at the first attempt. So we'll just continue. We'll continue to try. We'll continue to go through everything. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And last words from you, because our audience, they all look relaxed. Nobody has left. It's like enjoying you, but we have to come to an end. Do you have any other, Dr. Ryan,
I just want to say that I really appreciate this opportunity, for bringing Jamia and I, to this platform. And, we can all make, one small step in the right direction. We can, be able to shift maybe perceptions or enhance our own awareness, and be more aware of our own blind spots. So just take that small step. That's all we need, is each one of us to take that small step forward so that we can create more inclusive communities.
Yes.
Again, thank you for having us.
Okay. And remember, if you look on the chat box, we have all the information you need. Harvard alumni for mental health and Ryan Consulting Company. Please take the information. You can contact any of us you need. And also, remember, we have so many events. If you go to our website now, you see many events lined up. Always check our website. And if there's anything, any one of that interests you, please join us. And Harvard Alumni for Mental Health is not just about Harvard alumni. I just want to bring it to your attention. We see collaboration with so many other people because Harvard alumni members have families, they have friends, and whatever impacts them impacts the alumni. So our program and the events are open. We try to collaborate with many companies, and hopefully we'll be able to plan another one with this power couple. Okay? Yes, hopefully we'll be able to put something together with you in the near future. And to our audience, we are very thrilled to have had you this evening. Thank you very, very much for staying on. Thank you for many of you. I could count about 5 or 6 people that called in Nigeria. I couldn't believe it. And it was 1 a.m. Nigerian time, but they were just, because some of them actually have some of their kids here going to school. So they know what the experiences are, so, and they are eager to really learn so that they can also help their children to navigate the process while they are here. And some of these things also in African continent anyway. Yeah, African continent. Every little move we make, we call it anger, and it shouldn't be. We have to start to redefine the word, change the language, change the narrative, and that will really help us. Marie, I'm done. You want to close it out?
Thank you so much to this outstanding panel. Thank you, Ngozi, for bringing Dr. Warner and Jamia tonight. It was incredible. I really appreciate your expertise and all the concrete steps that you have provided for our audience, our members around the world to do better, dialogue 1 inch more, and continue this searching for within themselves and in their relationships, the ways to connect with each other in more caring, supportive, and respectful ways. Thank you so very much to all of you tonight, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Please take good care.